This week's discussion is really just a conclusion to draw on what was learnt from the course, and to just go through and outline the fundamental aspects that were understood through the course, to give a reminder of the central points in the discussions, readings, and case studies. This also will give the opportunity to look at the final essay and have a chance to answer the questions of what it's about and how to approach it. There'll be no case studies or additional readings for this week because it's just going to be focused on quite a short and sweet summation of the course overall. So, a reminder of the examination, which will be coming up in the following 2 weeks. We're going to require you to write a 1,000-word essay, choosing one community and heritage that you belong to and answering the questions: what community and heritage do you belong to? Does it positively enhance or negatively affect your sense of well-being? How does it affect your sense of belonging, attachment, and identity? You can choose to either interweave these questions and create one succinct essay, or you're also welcome to break them up into 3 different questions and answer them separately. It's totally up to you. What I'd like is to see something similar to the week on Jewish heritage in the Western world, where I gave a very personalized yet analytical explanation of how my community heritage is impactful for my sense of identity. So something along those lines is what I'm looking for. So week 1, we focused on an overview of the course to address and outline the meaning of community and cultural heritage and how these concepts are explored. We also addressed the definitions of cultural heritage, the central contemporary debates within the field, and the assignment was introduced and explained. The discussion was around what is cultural heritage and what defines community, and looking at the definitions of tangible and intangible heritage, social significance, and heritage value. We also looked at the institutional bodies that disseminate hegemonic knowledge, such as UNESCO, ICIMOS, the Borough Charter, to name a few. So week 2 was an explanation about community, memory, place, and attachment, and these ideas were explored and explained, which led to an explanation of how our sense of identity and place and memory and attachment all shape our heritage and sense of heritage. The case study of Jewish heritage was used as an outline to explore how community heritage affects our identity and shapes our sense of belonging and attachment through acts of intangible and tangible practice. The key discussion ideas were around what constitutes community, how do we belong to a community, and what gives us a sense of placehood within a community. The case study of Jewish heritage in the Western world was an explorative and illustrative way of understanding that through a personalized lens. Week 3, we dove deeper and it connected to week 2, looking at the idea of historical narratives and memoryscapes. This worked on what we had learned in week 2 about the idea of what memory is and how place, memory, and attachment are major components in a heritage identity. And then in week 3, we were able to look into the idea of historical narratives and how heritage and ancestry shape our sense of community belonging in the present day. After a discussion and outline of these concepts, there was a case study drawn on the Sydney Jewish Museum to discuss how ancestral and multi-generational memory in particular trauma and multi-generational traumatic memory, affects the historical narratives told within community settings, in effect shaping our sense of contemporary heritage identity. The particular case study focused on trauma and historic events like the Holocaust that shaped community heritage, and this was used as showing a specific case that could be applied to many different communities, as the experience of intergenerational trauma is more of a universal concept than a singular idea. The discussion primarily focused around how do historical narratives shape our heritage identity, how does history shape our present understanding of heritage, and how does memory shape the historical narratives that define our heritage and communities. In week 4, we took a turn into understanding issues in conserving and preserving community heritage. An in-depth look at post-colonial heritage conservation for community heritage was discussed and analysed as a way of outlining the issues of institutional top-down actors who control and direct heritage value and social significance. And this was addressed to explore the problems in recognising intangible heritage as a vital component in preserving and conserving Indigenous heritage for Indigenous communities in particular. After this, we drew on the case study of the Juukan Gorge Caves as a prime example of the destruction of a sacred Aboriginal Indigenous site of heritage significance for Aboriginal communities. In particular, their intangible and ephemeral connections to that site that affected their sense of heritage, place, belonging, and identity. The central key discussion topics for that was to identify Indigenous cultural heritage, understand ICOMOS and UNESCO, and look further into the idea of valuing and recognizing intangible heritage. In week 5, which was the last week for case studies and readings, we looked at the idea of heritage well-being as a framework and institutional concept to explain how the research in recent years is showing that by recognizing and partaking in practices of cultural heritage, individuals and communities can impactfully increase their sense of overall well-being. We also looked at the frameworks and methodologies from institutional top-down actors such as the ICROM, and in particular ideas that have stemmed from UNESCO and ICOMOS, and the ideas of how it can be instrumentally implemented in community settings to affect and increase community well-being. The key discussion topics for that week were mostly on heritage well-being, how does cultural heritage affect our sense of well-being, and also the idea of what constitutes a good life under these frameworks. Thanks so much for attending the course. I hope you gained some more insight into the idea of community heritage and were able to delve deeper into more philosophical and sociological explanations and investigations into the different facets of what makes and creates a heritage identity and history to affect the way we interact within the world, and how heritage is such a central and key component of the idea of human meaning making and human behavior, and how we understand and experience traditions, values, morals, and tangible and intangible practices within the world. Thank you. Take care.